Hello, and welcome to Brain Health Matters, a series of books, courses, and programs, all designed to help you become healthier so your brain can become happier and stronger. I'm Kate Kunkel, and this week's interview is with Dr. Beverly Yates, an internationally acclaimed diabetes expert who helps people get control over their blood sugar. Alzheimer's disease has been called type 3 diabetes, and after my conversation with Dr. Yates, I can understand why, as the cognitive symptoms of uncontrolled diabetes are very similar to dementia, and the hormonal dysregulation that comes with diabetes can have a hugely detrimental effect on our brains. I'm honored and excited to be sharing this conversation with you so that you can take advantage of learning the 5 lifestyle factors that comprise the Yates Protocol and to take to heart Dr. Yates' important messages to everyone. I'll be right back after this message.
You have 86 billion reasons to go vegan, and they're all resting right between your ears. That's right, 86 billion neurons that make up the master controller we call our brains. And while they're in control, our lifestyle choices determine how well they work, and that means we must nurture and protect them. The best way to do that? With a whole foods vegan diet that nurtures not just the physical, but also the emotional, mental, and spiritual brain. In the vegan brain, you'll learn how whole plant foods can nurture the healthiest version of yourself, and, perhaps more importantly, how your choices can reduce suffering for countless animals and help create a more compassionate, sustainable world. The Vegan Brain Second Edition also includes nutritious recipes and meal plans so that your journey towards a kinder, healthier future will be easy and delicious. Available in ebook format on Amazon.
Dr. Beverly Yates is an internationally acclaimed diabetes expert who helps people get control over their blood sugar, reclaim their energy, and enjoy life again. Many people feel hopeless in their struggles to control their blood sugar and are all too often shamed and blamed by the very doctors and health professionals they consult. But there's no shaming and blaming here, and that's why I'm so excited to have Dr. Yates to share her knowledge about the lifestyle aspects that can make a profound difference in blood sugar control and therefore the risk of developing dementia and Alzheimer's. Thank you so much for joining me, Dr. Yates.
Oh, you're very welcome, Kate. I appreciate this invitation to talk to you, your audience, and this community. These issues around blood sugar, around brain health, dementia, Alzheimer's, all of these things, they're all very related. And I think, I suspect we're going to have yet more revelations about this over the course of the next 5 to 10 years. I think there's going to be a lot more things coming. So, if we're looking for a forecast, this is a great time to have this conversation.
Yes, yes. When you said forecast, I just read something about how many more people are expected to develop dementias of all types over the next up until the 2050. And it's pretty scary because how on earth is the healthcare system going to handle this?
That's a great question. You sound like me. I have shared with family and friends and colleagues for decades now, right? 30 plus years clinical work. We as a nation and we as a planet cannot afford this kind of health catastrophe. We really can't afford any, but this one in particular will be devastating in a way that's going to wipe out not only our older population and generation, but we're also going to wipe out middle-aged people. We're going to wipe out, our teens. I mean, right now we have a situation where kids as young as age 8 have type 2 diabetes. That's crazy. And we're seeing so many more adults now showing up with type 1, which used to be called juvenile onset diabetes, people in their 30s, 40s, 50s. So we know that the brain health effects will be magnified. This is just going to get worse, not better.
Yeah, I'm so glad you brought that up, Beverly, about type 1, because I was a little confused. I'm hearing people, a good friend of ours passed away last year, and she was diagnosed with type 1 when she was like 40. I always thought you had to be a child. What's happening there? I don't understand.
That's a great question. What is happening there? I think in our busy, complex, and overly stressed out world, a lot of things are shifting simultaneously. Within the course of your lifetime and my lifetime, we've seen our food supply become really corrupted. Back in the day, right? If you got a box of some sort of cocoa mix, you probably remember this. It said cocoa, sugar, maybe some dried milk powder or whey, maybe a little pinch of salt, and that was it. If you read the labels, if you're a nerd like me as a kid, you read those labels, right? You wanted to see what was in something, that was it. Now, if you look at most commercially produced products that are some sort of cocoa mix, oh my goodness, it's so many chemicals, you can barely pronounce them. There's no cocoa in it or cacao. It's, so I think part of it, we have this strange food environment, beverages, the air, the water. We are surrounded with toxins. We have all kinds of strange messaging that can come in if we're on social media, depending on what we're watching on the news. People's sleep habits are disrupted. The social fabric might be completely corrupted or frayed. It's a lot right now, Kate. It's really a lot.
Yeah, and you mentioned about like the contents in whatever it is. Sugar itself, we're getting to the meat here of diabetes and sugar. So we know that sugar is the problem, but it's not just the sugar itself. It's how our bodies react to the sugar. And I think a lot of people get confused. Like, what does insulin resistance really mean? Because it's a confusing term for people who are not really in the world of, figuring it out.
Sure. So let's make sure we have clarity about this so people listening will know what are we talking about and why are we so fussed about it. So insulin and glucose have a very special relationship in the body. Glucose is another name for blood sugar. Insulin is a hormone, and it acts as a receptor, really a key sort of relationship on the edge of a cell. So insulin, when it's working properly, helps blood sugar, glucose, to get inside a cell to be used as energy in the cell. If you have an excess of energy available inside the cells, or the insulin relationship with glucose is frayed, is broken, is not working well over time, if there's just too much blood sugar all the time, your insulin response gets more and more resistant, i.e. less sensitive to working effectively. So instead of having your energy available inside the cell, the energy that blood sugar represents, the glucose, instead goes to storage places, usually stored as fat. Often it starts in the liver. It could be around the abdominal organs, visceral kinds of fat, belly fat, etc. There's very specific places it goes. And as that process gets more and more broken, as insulin resistance goes up and as insulin sensitivity goes down, what happens then is that a person is far more vulnerable to the effects of what will be increasing inflammation. That inflammation is a real jackal because it can break any number of things depending on what your own vulnerabilities are. We can all experience this in a simple sense. If someone insults you one day, it might be a day where you're in a fabulous state mental health, right? You feel fine. You're like, what an idiot. And you don't pay any attention to it, right? It's like water off a duck's back. You don't care. Another day, someone insults you and it really wounds you. It gets in far and deep. That person's living rent-free in your head, and it's a problem for you. So with that in mind, we have to understand for blood sugar and how it expresses when we have problems, people have different levels of vulnerability. Stress and sleep tend to be the wild cards that make the difference. And it's just important to understand that both stress and chronically poor sleep also threaten brain health. And some of the ways they do that is because of the derangement, the altered effect of insulin and blood sugar together. So if someone's insulin resistant, this can start to set up this dynamic where their brain health is now threatened. And anyone who's listening, if you know you have prediabetes or you suspect that, please go get tested and check out. And don't think you've got an easy pass. This blood sugar stuff is on a spectrum. And with the story that I can share later when we have time about my mother-in-law, she originally had prediabetes before she had Alzheimer's. And if I'd known then what we know now, at the time I was an engineer, I had gone back to school to become an naturopathic doctor. I would have made sure that my father-in-law, I could partner with him and then the rest of the family to make sure that she had the support she needed to turn her blood sugar situation around. We just didn't know. This was over 20 years ago. We just did not know. Now I know.
Yeah, I'm so glad you brought that up because I hear from people all the time, oh, I've just been diagnosed with prediabetes. It's okay, I'll keep it under control. But there's a big shaking of the head.
Yeah, no, it's a warning sign. There is a spectrum of blood sugar response. And some of the people who seemingly are lower towards the middle range, let's say, of prediabetes, not necessarily right at that edge, that borderline, type 2 diabetes might think, oh, I'm okay. And you might be getting shined on, a lot of smoke blown up your skirt, so to speak, from your doctor's or health team, because they too think that that's not a big deal. That's a mistake in today's world. We're getting so much more information and a much better read on what metabolic health means. And some of us genetically or by experience of trauma, other things, we are just much more under threat. So if you have prediabetes, please, I just asked with all due respect, do take that seriously and do what you can to get your blood sugar numbers back into that healthy range and keep them there. So prediabetes is A1C of 5.7 to 6.4. Type 2 diabetes is defined as an A1C of 6.5 or higher.
So that's a big range because you hear all kinds of numbers up there. Do the numbers like correlate with how much more likely you are to have brain problems, or it doesn't matter? Doesn't
That's
matter.
a great question. Yeah, from what I've seen clinically, no. Quite a few of the people who were later diagnosed with dementia, including Alzheimer's, which is a subtype of dementia, um, their prediabetes numbers were sometimes like a 5.8, 5.9, 6.0. It wasn't necessarily say 6.3, 6.4, right on that precipice before type 2. I just think there's probably more to these mechanisms from a physiologic point of view that we maybe just don't know now. And that's part of my forecast. We're going to get way better at assessing what is specifically a metabolic threat for any given individual. And then how do they need to respond to it, right? There's these 5 steps in the Yates Protocol that are very specific for blood sugar regulation, knowing that will unlock or yield the health benefits across all aspects of life. Because when your blood sugar is a mess, so many things break. I mean, it's not pretty.
Yeah. Well, yeah, I've seen many people with, like, a friend of mine in Oregon. She just lost another foot. She now has lost 2 feet.
That's horrible. That should just never happen. That someone has not gotten the help that they so richly deserve and need. Clearly, this is crazy. I'm so sorry to hear that. People should not be losing body parts. It's 2023 and going forward. I can understand thousands of years ago because people maybe didn't have all these pieces, but in today's world, that shouldn't happen.
No, it shouldn't. So you just briefly touched on the Yates Protocol, and I really want to dive into that because my show is all about helping people feel empowered and taking the steps that they need to take so that this does not drag them into the abyss of dementia. So 5 lifestyle tips. What can your factors, I guess, is more the word. What can we do to stop this in its tracks?
I salute you for your point of view about people taking charge. I think everybody is responsible for their own health outcomes. That doesn't mean you don't listen to others or take professional advice, but you're the one that's got to live with it. Right?
The buck stops here. The buck stops here.
I hear you, sister. The buck stops here. All right, let's do this. So these 5 steps that are so sensitive for blood sugar regulation, these comprise my life's work now around bundling this up in a way that people can understand and take action. So the Yates Protocol is this. Step number 1 has got to be nutrition. It is the bullseye of the target. Just like we say for people who are athletes that you can't out-exercise a bad diet, the same is true for the entire rest of your life, whether or not you've ever been an athlete, right? You have to eat quality food on a regular basis, and it does not need to be super expensive. I don't want this to feel like it is something only for the privileged, the resource, the elite. This is for everyone, but you do need to be specific about how you're eating. So finding nutrition that works for you and that gives you great, fabulous blood sugar control, that's step number 1. Step number 2 is to figure out what is your needs for meal timing. Meal timing makes a big difference for blood sugar regulation. I'll give you 2 tips right now. One is to make sure that your dinner time is 3 to 5 hours before your bedtime. In other words, give your belly a chance to rest, your gut, when you're asleep. Your body does all this fabulous work for you when you're awake for digestion. But when you're asleep, the last thing it wants is a really heavy meal late at night. And then you go from eating that big bunch of food sitting there in your belly, and now you go from vertical to horizontal. That creates all that pressure. So when we talk about heartburn and GERD, gastroesophageal reflux disease, and where did it come from? It comes from often this eating really late, big amount of food, maybe it's really heavy meal, and then now you're on your side, gravity no longer help you, right? Get that food down, the muscles of the stomach. I mean, please, people, 3 to 5 hours between dinner and bedtime. I just feel that we really have to pay attention to that, just to put that mechanical pressure on the stomach sphincter as it connects with the esophagus. It's heartburn. I'm just saying, if you're suffering from heartburn, and if anything I just said resonated, you really should look at it.
Yeah. And to me, it just seems like diabetes has become like overwhelmingly a problem, partly because we have an influx of North American sweets like soda pops and those sorts of things. The stores are just jammed. You see people coming out with literally a cart load of sugary drinks. You offer somebody water and they don't want it. It's got to be a sugary drink because they think that's healthier because it's giving them calories, because calories are, an issue. But it's really interesting culturally. But we also see it in areas where people don't have access to nutritious food in North America, right? They load up on things. They don't even realize how much sugar is in there because it's hidden in so many things. I think that might be something to address. How do we know that we're not getting pumped full of sugar when we're eating?
Yeah, you have to read labels to understand it, right? What you're talking about here, Kate, is the fact that one of the things we're exporting and is becoming a part of cultures around the world is the consumption of ultra refined, highly processed foods and beverages where the water content is minimal, like I'm sitting right here with a glass of water. And instead, people prefer soda or other things that have sugars, whether they are real, honest to goodness sugar or artificial sweeteners and fake sugars added. And the thing is that the tongue and the brain have a very interesting relationship. Your taste buds on your tongue signal to the brain the kind of calories it's about to get. So if your taste buds perceive sweetness, then the brain gets the signal, hey, sweetness is coming. The brain interprets that as calories. Well, here's the thing. If you use fake sugars, artificial sweeteners, you've actually not saved yourself anything because your brain is expecting calories. And at some point, about 60 minutes to 90 minutes after the consumption of the artificial sweeteners, the fake sugars, your brain goes, wait, where's my calories? And then you might find you want to snack. You want to snack on all sorts of things. And because you're now behind the ingestion of actual calories, you're probably going to want to snack on either more sweets, the simple refined carbohydrates that are so problematic, the simple sugars, right? Added sugars. Or you might want really savory, umami, high calorie kind of foods, like say biscuits and gravy. That's one example, right? Every culture's got some version of this.
Right. So that's when you said about the calorie, your brain thinks the calories. So also, does that mean the hormonal stuff is going to kick in? Because is that why, like I've heard people say, oh, I have pre-diabetes, so I'm drinking Diet Coke, but that sounds like that's probably not a good idea.
In my opinion, and the research has shown this, I was starting to be concerned about this in the early 2000s. Now here we are in the 2020s. And yeah, the research shows very clearly that those beverages are not providing you with the benefit that you want. If you really want to pay attention to your blood sugar and be healthy, your best choice is by far clean source of water. Hopefully you have good quality water. I know that can be a problem in different parts of the country and different parts of the world, along with, let's say, herbal teas. If you're caffeine sensitive, if you're not caffeine sensitive, black tea is fine. You have those options, but again, no added sugars. It's so important because otherwise you're constantly telling your body, hey, we're eating things. Oh, I need insulin. Oh, what does insulin do? It's going to go grab up the blood sugar. If your blood sugar is already high, there's too much in the cells. The cells are stuffed. They can't take any more in. It's going to get stored as fat somewhere in your body. And don't make assumptions. If someone is overweight or obese, that does not necessarily mean they have type 2 diabetes. There are plenty of skinny, really slender type 2 diabetics. It's quite possible to be thin on the outside and fat on the inside. TOFI, TOFI. It's a real thing. And in some parts of the world, that's much more likely to be the expression of type 2 diabetes or prediabetes. And therefore, the brain health piece, the heat's getting turned up under the poor froggy. Let's let the brain be the frog. It's like in a bucket, in a pot of water on the stove, and we're turning up the heat slowly, 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 till finally the brain's getting cooked. And now we have the expression of symptoms when all of this process started years before. It did not come out of the blue.
Right. Wow. So first two parts, we've got the what we eat, when we eat it. What's the next factor?
Okay. So the third step that's really critical here is the power of, and I can flip the order of these two, but I think for the importance of talking about brain health, let's make sleep be step number 3. Sleeping is healing and healing is sleeping. You have to get great sleep on a regular basis. And as we age, sometimes that can get more elusive than it was perhaps when we were younger. That doesn't mean we shouldn't pay attention. We should still pay attention and make sure you have a consistent bedtime and a consistent awaken time. Weekdays, weekends, vacation time, not vacation time. Be as consistent as you possibly can. If you change time zones for work or for vacation, that's okay. Do what you can to adjust to that time zone, quickly. Get out, get some sunshine in your eyes, even if it's cloudy, get that fresh air in your local place when you change time zones so it can help your whole body to reset and get your hormonal cycle back into rhythm, because that's an important relationship.
Yeah, sleep. I know that if I'm having a little more trouble sleeping now, I'm 65, so sometimes it gets a little bit dicey, but I do stay to that schedule. And I found that when I did that, That helped a lot. Just always. It's 9 o'clock to bed. I know that sounds early, but I eat early too. But it's 9 o'clock to bed, and the cats get me up at 5:30, 6 o'clock. So I don't have a choice there. They make me do that. But it does seem to help just to have that regularity every day.
That's exactly right.
Okay, so now we've got sleep. What's the next factor? You were saying they were running neck and neck. What's the next one that's so close to sleep?
So these are so related. It's stress. Stress can be a hijacker of your blood sugar. It can absolutely just take it away from you and cause it to spiral up. If you're under chronic stress, unrelieved stress, or if you have a really severe episode of stress, it can really, really wreak havoc with your blood sugar and can set you up for a whole host of health problems. Heart disease is more likely. Problems, obviously, with blood sugar are more likely. Other kinds of inflammation risks, they all go up in the presence of chronic stress because your body doesn't really get to rest and repair. Your sleep is not as effective for a reset, if you will, because stress is running the show. Stress can have you thinking that you're running from a bear or a tiger 24/7, and it can pump out those chemicals of cortisol, neurotransmitter of adrenaline, etc. But in the event of an actual physical emergency, you're running, you're either going to be fleeing or you're staying and fighting. Either way, you're burning off those chemicals that have turned you into Superwoman or Superman in that moment, right? So you've got all this chemical background, but you aren't burning it off. And your blood sugar stays up in response because the blood sugar goes, whoa, I just saw cortisol come with me now. I saw adrenaline coming with me now. We need to be ready to be active. So now, of course, blood sugar goes up. Blood sugar goes up. Now here comes insulin. They're not going to go up together. It'll be blood sugar's gone like that, and insulin's probably gone like that, trying to catch it. So then you have a crash when you come down. Next thing you know, you might get really sleepy and tired. You're fatigued. That relationship I described earlier when we talked about insulin resistance, you can understand all of this extra blood sugar should represent potentially energy. If the energy were functional, people with diabetes would be the most energetic people you've ever met. It's ironic how much fatigue and exhaustion is a hallmark of type 2 diabetes and prediabetes. It's amazing.
Our friend who passed away, she's the one who was diagnosed with type 1 at a later age. She also, she slept all the time. It seems she had no energy whatsoever. Now that you mentioned that, I can see how she was just done in.
Yeah. Our friends with type 1 diabetes, if they have great care and if they themselves have absolutely become a personal advocate or someone in their family as they were growing up, if they had it earlier in life, was an advocate for them, are really sensitively attuned to this. And for those who have really amazing blood sugar control, despite being a type 1 diabetic, type 1, in case people don't know, means you need to take insulin for the rest of your life because your pancreas does not make the hormone insulin. It just doesn't. And some can do such a fabulous job, either because they've acquired the knowledge or they've had the support or the combination of the two. So shout out to the people with type 1 diabetes. There are also situations where with type 1 diabetes, people just don't get good info. They really don't. Or for whatever reason, their body's just not responding to what might seem as otherwise helpful therapies. And they'll be like your friend, really, really tired all the time. So similar, different root cause effects. One is autoimmune. Pancreas doesn't make insulin. Take insulin as a medication for the rest of your life. That's type 1 diabetes. The other one is usually more lifestyle side based in terms of its root cause or onset. Issues with nutrition, with stress, with sleep, with meal timing. And we will eventually talk about our last one is going to be exercise and strength training. But before we talk about that, why I say it's neck and neck between stress and sleep is this. Problems with stress or problems with sleep can lead to disruptions with two hormones that I call the twin gremlins. They're not talked about a lot. They do make a difference for blood sugar control. One is leptin, one is ghrelin. Ghrelin is an odd spelling. It's G-H-R. Ghrelin, E-L-I-N. I have to say myself. Get the letters in the right order, like ghost. G-H-R-E-L-I-N. And then leptin, L-E-P-T-I-N. The thing that's interesting about ghrelin is I say, remember the word ghrelin like growling. It's about hunger. So it's a signal from your stomach that says, hey, I'm hungry. So if your stomach growls, or it used to when you're hungry, you feel hungry, that's ghrelin letting you know, hey, it's time to eat. Now, leptin is all about satiety, knowing when it's time to stop to eat and feeling full, satiation. And for some people, those things are broken. If someone has disordered sleep, like say sleep apnea, other kinds of sleep disorders, they are far more vulnerable to problems with overeating and not knowing when to stop eating and being really hungry and not being able to tell, like, am I truly hungry or am I kind of hungry? Am I bored? Like, it just confuses the whole picture. So if the sleep is a problem or if stress is a problem, those hormones can go out of whack and you can then become a type 2 diabetic. There's a stereotype that people have in their heads, much of the medical community has in its head too, that all of the people who have type 2 diabetes have partied their way to the diagnosis and somehow deserve their health problem. First off, I haven't found that to be strictly true. And secondly, look, we're here to help everyone. That's why I say no judging, no blaming, no shaming. Healing doesn't happen when people feel judged. Healing doesn't happen when people feel blamed. Healing doesn't happen when people feel shamed. And that's true for other illnesses that unfortunately have this stigma where people are looked down upon because they simply have a specific health concern. Let's just help people, meet them where they're at so they can be healthy. All of this will support brain health.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah. And blame and shame and all of that on its own has an impact on the brain. We had a guest who talked about, shame, guilt, how it has an absolute impact on how your brain functions, besides hormones and everything else. So that's a wonderful point. Thank you for that. And the last point, exercise, my favorite.
Absolutely. As an athlete, I just love exercise, right? So exercise and strength training, I tell people, think about it like this. Exercise and strength training are blood sugar sponges. They actively help you absorb your blood sugar so it does something helpful for you. It's one of the reasons why some of these classes of drugs, the peptides, et cetera, are so popular right now. It's trying to resensitize the relationship with these receptors so that people have some way to absorb your blood sugar. So when you're exercising, your muscles need fuel. What's their fuel? It's glucose. And so it brings your blood sugar down. You'll see a temporary rise for about 30 minutes to an hour after you exercise for this reason. You were exercising, right? So your body has released more glucose, more blood sugar to make it available to fuel those beautiful muscles. Then after the exercise is done and the muscles have gotten their food, the glucose, they're a sponge, they've absorbed it, your blood sugar should come wonderfully down. And so I always tell people, make it simple. If you're stuck on Zoom all day, Zoomlandia, right? Have your kettlebells right at your desk, and you can be doing all sorts of things to help yourself with your upper body. Most important is to move the muscles of the lower body, especially your thighs. Your most powerful, biggest muscles are your thigh muscles, right? Your hamstrings and quadriceps. You can do wall sits and squats, all sorts of things with body weight. So if you're not at the gym, that's okay. You can absolutely have great muscular build and muscularity to make the difference for blood sugar control.
Yeah, and we know that leg strength has a direct correlation to brain health, right?
Yep.
We know that if you have stronger quadriceps and thigh muscles, you are going to actually have a stronger brain. That must be the connection, because I couldn't figure out why that was, but it makes perfect sense that you're using the glucose more effectively. So, Dr. Yates, can people just work with you remotely? Because we have listeners all around the world. You're in what state in the U.S.?
I'm in California. My clinic, with myself and my team, we have a 100% virtual clinic. So people can connect with us wherever they may be. And the reality is people travel so much these days. I started in telemedicine options since 2009, always an early adopter here in Silicon Valley. And, who knew, right? With the realities of a pandemic and all, how important that was going to be. And most of my patients historically have had heart disease and diabetes. So they felt so safe and protected. And we've decided to go all in on this virtual option because it's convenient. People can do it from home. They can do it from their workplace if they're traveling. It's just more practical. And we're doing the lifestyle side. So we're not doing any medications. Whoever prescribed a med for you, you have that relationship with them. You continue to have that relationship with them. If you need to change your meds, you talk to them. I want to be really clear about what we're doing. We're doing the lifestyle side. We're helping you with those 5 factors. We use supplements strategically where they can be helpful, particularly with people who are really fatigued or whose blood sugar is just really been bouncing all over the place. They just need more support.
How do you know what your blood sugar is doing? Like, I mean, we if people are diabetic, they have the little strips and the pokers and everything. But what if you don't know and you haven't been diagnosed and you just really don't know what sets you off or how to stay in a good level, at a good level?
Yeah, so you can use a glucometer and test strips. That's one way to assess your blood sugar in the moment, or when you first awaken in the morning. That's called a fasting morning blood sugar number. You can use a CGM, a continuous glucose monitor, attached to your arm and your phone, Bluetooth, and it'll give you data. You'll know exactly what your blood sugar number is in the moment, 24/7. I'm a fan of that, simpler. And because it hurts, keep sticking your finger to get drops of blood. And so a lot of people just stop doing it because they're just like, ow, I get that. Other ways you can go is you can go to a lab. Here in the US, it's now completely available to the general public. You can go on your own. You do not need a doctor's orders and get your A1C checked and your fasting morning blood sugar taken. Fasting being that you have had nothing to eat and nothing to drink other than water since, let's say, at least 12 hours has gone by. So if you had dinner at 7 and you went in the morning to get your blood drawn, like say at 7:30, in the morning, that's a 12-hour or more fast. That's what we want, right? For fasting morning blood sugar number. Before you take in any food, if you have black coffee with a little spot of cream, nope, you're not fasting. If you have bone broth, nope, you're not fasting. It needs to be water. I want to just be really clear.
Yeah. I'm kind of fascinated with this continuous glucose monitoring because I saw you on the show with Dr. Sanderson, and you were talking about how one food can set you off, even though you're not diabetic. Can you explain a little bit to that?
Yeah, it's just been really fascinating to get that real-time data for these actionable insights around the use of CGMs, continuous glucose monitors. So what I was saying with Dr. Sanderson was there's foods that are otherwise healthy in the generic sense, but sometimes people have an individual response, right? A bio-individual response where their blood sugar just spikes. And you're like, wow, they were eating cauliflower, or they had quinoa, or maybe they had, let's say, a half cup of blueberries. It wasn't like 5 baskets of blueberries, it was a half cup. And their blood sugar just took off like a rocket, and then eventually it's got to come back down. And in working with people, it has been just such an eye-opener to really understand something that I had kind of suspected from the beginning of my career, which was we probably aren't all having the same reactions to foods, right? Like we know that people have food intolerances and food sensitivities. Clearly, some people have food allergies, which is severe and serious. But I kept wondering if there wasn't more to this. And now what I've seen sometimes with these blood sugar dysregulations, that it often corresponds when people feel brain fogged, when people feel anxious, they're feeling particularly sad and depressed. Other mental health kinds of expressions of what's going on sometimes are intimately tied to their blood sugar. And it has unlocked the game and changed it for people who've done that blood sugar based work. And they're like, I had no idea that the feeling of anxiety, the feeling of loneliness, of sadness, of depression, the feelings of just this brain fog, like I cannot put my thoughts together, are actually tied to my blood sugar control. And now that I've got healthy levels of blood sugar control, I feel so much better. I've got my energy. I'm not fatigued and exhausted. I don't need that afternoon nap. I don't have a food coma, etc. Right? Like they're just better. And therefore, their brain is better. You know it.
Yes, absolutely. So that sounds like a really great idea to have one of these things to even know what foods might trigger you into that condition at the time, because otherwise you're kind of guessing.
Yeah. Test, don't guess. I think using continuous glucose monitor, if you can do it, and there are ways to get direct access. In the US, you do need typically a prescription to access them. There are some companies that make them available directly to the public. There's ways to close that gap. Internationally, these devices are often considered like thermometers, and so they're available over the counter. But whatever the situation is, it is worth it to get those snapshots real time of what is your blood sugar doing, because people always come away with insights. They're just really surprised. Like maybe they thought their pistachio, cacao, oat milk milkshake was just fine. And they might find out they've got this odd reaction to maybe oat milk, or maybe it's pistachios. You really need to look at it. Test, don't guess.
Oh, thank you for that. I love that. Dr. Yates, it has been such a treasure and a pleasure to chat with you. And I'm so grateful that you were able to join me today. I promise to try to keep these to a half hour so that people stay tuned with us. Is there anything you would like to offer people as a closing thought?
My closing thought is this: please prioritize your own self-care as much as you can, even in those moments when it feels impossible. There was a year where my mom was just so very ill, and I'm an only child. And in that year, I was happy to be caring for her, sad that she was so ill, just such a jumble of emotions. And I remember there were some days where literally my own self-care was not more than 4 or 5 minutes. I might take a lap or two here on a cul-de-sac because that's all I could do. Because at the time I was still raising our 2 children. I'm married. I had a clinic. I had all kinds of responsibilities. And it was just, an honor to support and love my mother on her way out of this world. She'd certainly provided fantastic love and support for me. So I got a chance to pay some of that back as her daughter, her only child. So I just want to say that I understand. I have empathy around the issues with self-care. Sometimes there's just too much going on and you're getting squished from all sides. Please have some gentleness and love and compassion for yourself. Put your own air mask on first before you assist others whenever and however you can. It's critical for your own health, especially for your brain.
Thank you so much, Dr. Yates. Folks, you can reach, I've got Dr. Yates' contact information in our show notes. And again, thank you so much for joining us to hear the wonderful wisdom of Dr. Beverly Yates, and I'll see you in 2 weeks. Thank you so much for joining us for this episode of Brain Health Matters. I'm Kate Kunkel, and I'm sure you've gained much value from Dr. Beverly Yates' inspiring message. Be gentle on yourself and look after you. Your health is in your hands. I've put Dr. Yates' contact information in the show notes, so be sure to learn more from her blog and on her YouTube channel. And remember, there are many more episodes of Brain Health Matters along with the latest brain health research on our website at brainhealthmatters.today. And if there's a topic you'd like to learn more about, let us know. We'll see if we can't find someone to come on to talk about it. And your help getting the word out is very much appreciated. Subscribe, write a review, or share our podcast with those who can use some help with brain health. Thanks again for joining us. And remember, it's never too early to look after your brain, but it can become too late. Now is the time to start.